You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Haristadoulou.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and it is time again to make some picks, this time for week number 10 of the NFL. I'm currently sitting at a record of 85-51 and on a 25-5 run right now. Last couple of weeks have been very good to us, so we're hoping for another strong week of double-digit correct predictions. That's always the goal. So make sure you comment your picks down below. Let me hear your thoughts and opinions on this week's matchups, maybe some of the bets you have placed for this weekend as well. But we'll dive right into the weeds of Thursday night football action between the Carolina Panthers and the Chicago Bears, and what I would call a little bit of a dud for this weekend's Thursday night football. Now, here's the deal. I'm going to come right out and say this. I really wish I didn't have to make the pick for this game because this is a very much up in the air one. The fact that Justin Fields is listed as doubtful for Chicago definitely makes this a little bit more of a shakier contest to pick on. I think if Justin Fields was there, I would be far more confident in Chicago's ability to win this game than I already kind of am. But right now, this is like a kind of a pick'em game, I guess you would say. I don't really know if you could sit here and argue that either one of these teams are a clear favorite in this matchup. I will say that Chicago, a little bit better as far as scoring is concerned, with their average of about 21 points a game to Carolina's 17.5. Not to mention that Carolina's averaging about 28 points a game allowed. But I mean, the Bears aren't too far behind. They're at 27. But with the fact that we've seen Chicago be able to put up a fight, even with Tyson Bagent under center the last couple of weeks here, despite some of the turnover issues we have seen, I do think that there is a kind of slight lean towards Chicago's favor here. Both teams, like I said, bottom 5 when it comes to points allowed. Carolina does boast a solid passing defense for all of their defensive struggles, and that is something that I think is worth keeping an eye on here. But I cannot stress that I do think, with Chicago showing last week that despite their loss, they were able to bring a fight early on to a Saints defense that was pretty good and put up 17 points in that loss, and they kept the Saints on their heels for a long portion of that game. I do think that there is a little bit more in the gas tank for Chicago than there is for Carolina at this stage in the season. Not to mention, on top of that, Chicago Bears love to run the football. It's kind of their bread and butter, especially this season. They're averaging about 135 yards a game, which is 4th best in the NFL. And Carolina allowing nearly 130 yards a game, actually 131 yards per game. That could spell a little bit of doom for Carolina. And that also, not to mention some of the injuries that we're watching here. CJ Henderson and Brian Burns are already listed as out on that defense, not to mention Xavier Woods and Von Bell are also questionables for the defense there. I do have some concerns for Carolina and what has already been a struggling team all year long. So I think I'm erring on the side of Chicago. I don't expect a ton of points, but I do like the Bears in this victory, especially being at home. I think that kind of sways things a little bit more in their favor as well. So I have the Bears winning 23-17. I think a somewhat fun contest, but not one that I think everyone and their mother is going to be tuning in to watch. Now, moving into Sunday's game, the first one that we're going to look at here is going to be the Colts taking on the Patriots, and this one is another one of those overseas game in Frankfurt, Germany. Now, here's the deal. This one, I'll start by saying this. All of the London games, I would say about half of them have been fairly entertaining, but there have been a couple other ones that have been duds. And between these two teams here, this is another one that I'm kind of looking at as somewhat of a dud. And if you're somebody that likes over-unders, the over-under on this one is somehow listed at 43. Not quite sure where that number's coming from, because when you look at the way these games have played out, only one game has gone over that number with 45 points, and that was between Jacksonville and Buffalo, two offenses that are pretty darn good if you ask me. On top of that, every game under that has been like 40, 35, and I believe 30 points altogether, if I'm not correcting. So not mistaken. So there's just not a ton of points I see on the table. It's very clear that when these teams travel to these overseas games, the offenses seem to take a little bit of a lapse and the defenses somewhat seem to kind of have an advantage. For the most part, I will say that like Jacksonville, Buffalo was a little bit of an exception to that rule here. Not to mention that when you look at the way things are kind of turning out right now, the Colts could potentially be without Josh Downs, who has emerged as a really excellent target as a rookie for this Indianapolis Colts team. Drew Ogletree, another tight end they really like that they can go after in key situations. And then you look at the Patriots injury list, like my goodness, it's like a mile long. Trent Brown, Christian Barmore, Jonathan Jones, Dietrich Wise, Demario Douglas, Devontae Parker, Juwan Bentley, Miles Bryant, all listed as questionable in this game. For what it's worth though, Indianapolis has had a pretty, very surprisingly, I would say, high-powered offense. For them to be a top 10 offense minus Anthony Richardson this season, that is not what I expected to be saying at this point once we first learned that Anthony Richardson would be done for the year, or at least when he was first knocked out with injury. Didn't expect to consider them still sitting somewhere within the top 10, averaging nearly 26 points a game. And when you're going up against a defense in New England that's allowing about 25 a game, maybe that's where they're kind of getting that over-under number from. But again, overseas games just don't seem to have a ton of offense. One thing that I will be watching in this matchup, though, and that I do think is somewhat key to how this whole thing plays out, is how New England fares against that rushing attack that Indianapolis has been deploying this entire season. Zach Moss has been excellent. During the absence of Jonathan Taylor, I don't think anyone expected him to kind of explode the way he did for the production that he had. Now that Jonathan Taylor's back in the fold and he continues to knock off Russ, and it's clear he's getting more and more comfortable post-injury, things are getting a little bit scary on the ground for Indianapolis. And the Patriots, for what it's worth, with all their struggles they have, with the amount of points they allow, the yards that they allow per game, they are a really solid run defense, allowing a flat 100 yards per game. So that will be kind of what I consider the determining factor in this game. Indianapolis also boasts a pretty porous defense, I would say, themselves. They let teams move a lot. They let teams score a lot. They're allowing nearly 27 points a game. So despite the fact that New England is one of the worst scoring offenses in the NFL, they might have some success, albeit again, overseas game, maybe not, but maybe they find some success against a Colts defense that has allowed teams to move and get themselves into the end zone. However, I just don't really know the likelihood of these offenses putting up a ton of points. I like a lower scoring affair for this one. I have the Colts winning. For what it's worth, just the Patriots right now, with all the injuries they're dealing with and just kind of the dysfunction that I am seeing from this team, I'm somebody that lives in the New England area, so I get to kind of tap into the Patriots a little bit more than I feel every other team in the league. And it is as ugly here as it seems from the outside. And I've been picking against the Patriots pretty much all season long, minus like one game here or there, and I've pretty much gotten all their games right as the loser of every single matchup. So I'm going to stick with the Patriots losing here. I like the Colts 20-16. I see the Patriots continue to struggle on offense. I think maybe the Colts offense slows down a little bit in this game. Again, being overseas matchup might be a little bit of an issue for them both, but I do like the Colts 20-16, lower scoring affair. Now we start looking at the early window. So once this 9 o'clock game is behind us, 9:30 game Eastern time, we move into the first matchup of that early window. And we're looking at the Texans and the Cincinnati Bengals here. Now, Houston, my goodness, what they did last week, absolutely bananas. I literally thought there was no chance when Buffalo hit that final score that Houston was going to be able to come back, but CJ Stroud stepped in, made an absolute hell of a drive, hell of a play to Tank Dell into the back of the end zone, and stole a victory over Tampa Bay. However, Tampa Bay is not Cincinnati, especially not the Cincinnati of the last 4 weeks, who are currently on a 4-game winning streak. I love watching this Texans team play because they really just continue to surprise week in and week out. There are some weeks where I kind of leave the game scratching my head a little bit with some of their performances, but for the most part, this is a Texans team that will fight to the absolute finish to win. That being said, though, they are 1-3 on the road, and the Bengals are currently 3-1 at home. So Houston Texans coming into the jungle to take on the Bengals, not looking too well. Not to mention, they have a massive questionable list of injuries right now. Just looking at these names here, we got Jonathan Greenard, Steven Nelson, Blake Cashman, Will Anderson Jr., Nico Collins, Titus Howard, George Font, Laramie Tunsil, Jimmy Ward, Robert Woods, Damian Pierce. The list just feels like it goes on and on and on of guys that are going to potentially miss this game, or maybe even just wind up being limited because of what they're dealing with and get just some snaps here or there. Don't sleep on Houston, but there is a lot working against them in this game. That's not to say that the Bengals don't have some concerns, though. T. Higgins right now, Jamar Chase, both dealing with some issues at the moment, and it sounds like there's a potential that maybe Jamar Chase is either limited or just completely misses this game altogether, because there was some concern surrounding, I believe it was his knee last week. Both teams are about even in points allowed per game, and both teams struggle to run the football, so I think this one does kind of have the recipe for a passing type of game. And I mean, with CJ Stroud, the way he's throwing the football, and you got Joe Burrow on the other side, both these teams' bread and butter is the football through the air. So For me, how does this game get decided? I really think it comes down to who makes the mistakes. Both of these teams are very good at protecting the football. Houston right now currently has only 5 turnovers this season. That is best in the NFL, and Cincinnati's right behind them at only 6. So I think for this one here, it's going to come down to who makes the mistake in a crucial moment that I think kind of swings the game in their favor. And both of these defenses will be tasked with making that mistake, or forcing that mistake rather. The other thing that I looked at here, like I said, I don't talk a ton of betting here, but something I did notice, Texans +7, that's kind of a large spread for a team that is as competitive as they are. I understand the Bengals at home kind of on a hot streak right now, but it's not like the Texans didn't just come off a monumental comeback victory just last week. Like, I don't really know how you can count the Texans out like that. So Texans +7, kind of an attractive betting odd if you ask me. As for who I think is going to win, though, and come out victorious in this matchup, I like the Bengals. I also think that this game might wind up being a higher scoring affair. I think we're going to see a lot of throwing the football. And again, I think the Texans can be competitive. The defenses on both these sides are some solid units. They're not by any means great, but they're also not terrible. They both allow roughly about 20 points a game. So we could see some points on the board in this matchup. I'm going to take Cincinnati, though. I have them winning 31-30 in a tight affair. I think, again, a lot of points, going to be an exciting one in Cincinnati. Should be a really good time, but I don't quite know if CJ Stroud is just quite there and ready to take down Joe Burrow and the Bengals, who are right now emerging as a legitimate AFC contender after a really slow start to the season. Next, we'll take a look at the New Orleans Saints and the Minnesota Vikings, 2 teams that are sitting at 5-4 right now. You have the Vikings, who are 1-3 at home, which is a little bit concerning in this matchup for them, and a Saints team that can find victories on the road at 3-2. I do think that turnovers could be a very big factor in this game. When you look at what Minnesota has done all season long with the amount of fumbles and even some of the interceptions they've had this year, they just love to give the other team the football. And New Orleans is the best team when it comes to forcing those turnovers on the defensive side of the football. They have 18 right now. They're tied for first, so that could prove to be somewhat of an issue. And not to mention some of the injuries that the Vikings are looking at right now. Justin Jefferson, I don't think is going to be playing this week. I know he's kind of working his way back. He's now allowed to work his way back into practice. That window has been open for the 21 days, so there is that, but I don't expect to see him this week. KJ Osborne's also questionable. TJ Hawkinson, Christian Darrisaw. There are some injuries that I think are worth watching in Minnesota. And for what it's worth, I understand the Vikings just had a wild game this past week, and they came into Atlanta and made the massive upset victory. But is that likely to happen again? Especially against a Saints defense that I would say is better than the Atlanta Falcons defense? I don't know. Probably not. So with that in mind, unless the Vikings find some serious success in this game running the football, which is not their bread and butter by any means, they're averaging about 81 yards a game right now. And granted, Joshua Dobbs likes to create plays with his legs, so maybe that number could start to spike up a little bit over the next few weeks as we go through the back half of the season. Saints run D is probably their one point of weakness that they could focus on. They allow about 103 yards a game, but I just don't really foresee something like that. But I think the Josh Dobbs effect is real, and he can keep this Vikings team competitive. But I'm going to take the Saints in this one. I like the Saints 21-20. It's going to, again, probably be another one of those tighter affairs. I could see them maybe hanging around, but that Saints defense will probably come away with a turnover or 2. The Vikings feel like they're due for 1 or 2 every single week, and I could see the Saints capitalizing on a poor play here or there and ultimately being the deciding factor in what leads to a New Orleans victory here. Now we're looking at the Green Bay Packers taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. This will be an ugly offensive game. Absolutely believe that. When you look at the way these two defenses are, you have the Packers, who are allowing just about 20 points a game, Steelers allowing just about 20 points a game as well, and both of these defenses can be very disruptive at times. The Steelers more so than the Packers, but when you look at the Steelers offense, I mean, for what it's worth, it has not necessarily been the most impressive unit in the NFL. They are currently averaging about 16.5 points a game, so it's not like the Packers defense has a tall task to get ready for. But I do think that this one winds up being kind of a defensive bout, and I look at both these defenses as firmly better than the offenses that they're playing. Pittsburgh is a monster at creating turnovers and is definitely one of those things that, again, I think winds up being the deciding factor here with just the youth and inexperience, and sometimes this offense in Green Bay not being on the same page. I feel like we see a handful of mistakes here or there, or even just like mental errors, and it's kind of mounted to this point in the season. And I mean, the Packers are 3-5 for a reason. They're also only 1-3 on the road. You're going into Pittsburgh against a 3-2 Steelers team at home, and I'm not really feeling too well about the Packers in this matchup here. I also don't know how a tattered offensive line where Elton Jenkins and John Runyon are all, and Josh Neiman as well, are all currently listed as questionable. And if you're missing, one or two of those guys in this game here, does not bode well for this Packers offense. So I will say I'm leaning Steelers on this one here. I feel like unders were made for Steelers games, so if you're somebody that loves to bet over unders in this one just feels very, very likely. I think the over-under is currently set for like 38.5 right now, and both these teams combined are averaging about 36 points a game. Steelers don't like to let people score. Packers do a pretty good job keeping people out of the red zone themselves, so I'll take the Steelers in a very ugly but Steelers-type victory, 19-16. Now, this matchup, another one of those matchups that I really wish I just did not have to make a pick for. We have the Tennessee Titans heading into Tampa Bay. The Titans are 0-4 on the road. The Buccaneers have absolutely zero home field advantage at 1-3. Both teams are currently sitting at 3-5 and kind of in a rough spot right now. This feels like another one of those defensive standoff type of games. You have two teams that aren't really scoring a ton right now. Tampa Bay's averaging about 20 points a game. Tennessee's sitting around 18.5, and both of these defenses allow about 20 to 21 points a game, depending on which one you're talking about here. Buccaneers allowing just a little bit more. But overall, you have two of the best red zone defenses in the NFL. Tennessee allows touchdowns on only 36.7% of red zone trips, which is third best in the NFL. Tampa Bay allows on 34.6, which is actually second best. So this is another one of those where I could see both teams having a hard time getting into the red zone. Probably going to see a decent amount of field goals here. Will Levis came back down to earth last week as well after having a wild debut, and I'll be interested to see how he continues to grow in this offense now as the legitimate QB1, since he is named the permanent starter now for the rest of the season. And Tampa Bay's pass defense, for what it's worth, is second worst in the NFL in terms of yards per game allowed. They're sitting at nearly 280 yards a game, so that is definitely a good opportunity for Levis here. But Tampa Bay is a team that can, again, force turnovers, and they have a really tough run defense as well, which is kind of like the saving grace for a rookie quarterback over there in Tennessee. You have Derrick Henry and Tyjae Spears, who's a really nice relief back and kind of does things a little bit differently than Derrick Henry, so it keeps the defenses on their heels as far as the rushing attack goes. But with Tampa Bay being a team that has 15 turnovers forced this season, which puts them at third most in the NFL, and a run defense right now that's currently only allowing about 92 yards a game, this will be another tough one, I think, for Will Levis here. And it'll be a very interesting matchup to watch. It will be very fun to see Tennessee really try to air the football out in this game and take advantage of a secondary that's kind of hurt over there in Tampa Bay. I mean, Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis are both listed as questionable for this matchup here, so that is something worth watching. And it's not like Tennessee's coming into this game healthy either. I mean, Nicholas Petit-Frere just got put on IR. Sean Murphy-Bunting is doubtful. Traylon Burks is still questionable. Daniel Brunskill, Azeez Al-Shaair, Luke Gifford, Jack Gibbons, Anthony Kendall. I mean, both of these teams are coming in with kind of some injuries all over the ball, offense or defense, either side. But I do think that I'm going to take the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, stout defense with the veteran quarterback in this one at home. Like I said, Titans are 0-4 on the road. They cannot buy a victory so far right now when going into other people's territory. And while Tampa Bay struggles at home themselves, I'll take the veteran quarterback in this matchup here. But again, I'm not really confident on this one here, and I really wish that I didn't have to make a pick, but I'll take the home team for this one. Bucks 20-17. Now we have one of the more exciting matchups of the weekend. We're looking at the San Francisco 49ers taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville. Two teams coming off a bye, looking for some statement victories here. This is a prove-it game for Jacksonville and a must-win game for San Francisco, who has not won a football game in the last month. So, two top 10 scoring offenses versus two top 10 scoring defenses here. You have the 49ers averaging about 27 points a game, and the Jacksonville Jaguars are currently sitting at 24 themselves. So 2 top 10s there. And then scoring defenses, 17.5 allowed per game for the San Francisco 49ers, and the Jaguars allowing just 2 more points a game at 19.5 themselves. This will be a good one. San Francisco is going to have Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey back. Trent Williams is still listed as questionable, and that is one thing that you want to keep an eye on because Trent Williams, best left tackle in the NFL, probably best tackle in the NFL, period. This guy's been an all-pro for what feels like his entire career. If he's not in the game, it's going to be nice having Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel back, but having a guy like Trent Williams on the blind side of Brock Purdy, not having him there is crucial to how this offense will play out, in my opinion. I do think that running the football is going to be a little bit of a lost cause for the Jacksonville Jaguars in this game as well. San Francisco has a really good run defense. They're allowing only 86 yards a game, which puts them at 5th in the NFL on that number. So it's going to be up to Trevor Lawrence winning the football game with his arm. And I do think that this is a game that comes down to just realistically who has the better passing game, because when you look at the way these two teams shake out, yes, San Francisco has a really good run D. Jacksonville Jaguars is even better. They're allowing only 79 yards a game, but when you look at passing yardage allowed, San Francisco is currently sitting at about 228 yards allowed per game to the 263 that Jacksonville has. I think this comes down to the arm of the quarterbacks here, and for me personally, I'm a little bit higher on Trevor Lawrence than I am on Brock Purdy, especially after what we've seen from Purdy the last few weeks here, a little bit more of a mortal human being at quarterback. I'm erring on Jacksonville, and I'm going to kind of put my money where my mouth is right now. I have Jacksonville as one of the best teams in the NFL. They're sitting at 6-2. Their 2 losses are at home, which does kind of scare me a little bit in this matchup here, but San Francisco themselves, they're 2-2 on the road, so they have found a couple of their 3 losses when they're not in their building. So for what it's worth, it's not like either team, as far as being a road warrior or a home field advantage type team, really comes into play here. Both teams split even at 500 with their 2 wins and losses, but I'm going to take the team that I think has the better quarterback. I like Trevor Lawrence, and again, I think this is a game that comes down to who can throw the football more effectively, and I really like Trevor Lawrence in that passing attack that they boast over there in Jacksonville. So give me the Jaguars. Put my money where my mouth is. I have Jacksonville ranked higher than San Francisco. I'll take the Jaguars for the victory, 23-21 in a tighter contest, but what should be a exciting contest to watch. Now we're going to look at an AFC North divisional matchup here, and this is one that, man, oh man, there is a lot to dive into on this one. So the Cleveland Browns coming in, they are 1-2 on the road. Baltimore currently sitting at 3-1 at home. When you look at these two teams, we have 2 of the very best defenses in the NFL set to go head to head. As far as scoring is concerned, the Ravens are allowing just under 14 points a game. They are best in the NFL. And then the Cleveland Browns, not too far behind them, they're allowing just over 17 points a game themselves. They're 3rd best in the NFL at that. So you have 2 really good defenses going at it, but 2 offenses that I would argue are in very different places right now. How are both of these teams going to attack the opposing team's run defense will be something that I think is crucial to watch in this matchup here. Both these teams love to run the football. Browns are 3rd best in the NFL. Ravens are 1st in the NFL. As far as the run defense goes on the other side, both are top 10 units when it comes to stopping the run, allowing sub 100 yards, pretty much about 90 yards a game for both of them. So how do these teams attack the opponent's run defenses, but also which team winds up moving the ball through the air more effectively is something that I think will be worth keeping an eye on. Ravens lead the league in sacks right now. They are on a whopping 35 right now. They can bring the pressure and get the quarterback down at will and when necessary to keep their team alive in games. Browns, though, they're no slouches themselves. While they may be a little bit behind as far as a sack total goes, they are best in the league right now in terms of sack percentage, sacking the quarterback on 11.3% of dropbacks. They're the only team in the NFL right now with a double-digit number in that statistic, so just keep that in mind there. They may be a little bit behind in the numbers, but they are getting it done, honestly, more often than any team in the NFL, so that is also something to keep an eye on. But whoever can protect the quarterback and whatever offense can find some wiggle room between 2 really stout defenses is going to be the team that wins. And when you look at these 2 teams as far as offensive production goes, you have a Cleveland Browns team that's averaging about 22.5 points a game to a Baltimore Ravens team that's sitting at about 26.5 points a game. I like Baltimore in Baltimore to get the victory here. Again, they're 3-1 at home. You're going up against the Browns team that's 1-2 on the road themselves. I don't really buy in on Deshaun Watson and this offense that they have over there in Cleveland. I know they love to run the football, and their rushing attack is fun to watch. But when you look as far as health is concerned, while Odell Beckham and Michael Pierce are a couple of guys listed as questionables for this game here, Jedrick Willis just got thrown on the IR, Cameron Mitchell as well, David Njoku's questionable, Greg Newsome, DeJuan Jones, Alex Wright. There's a handful of offensive linemen I'm a little bit concerned about, some receivers as well with Goodwin and Bell. I like Baltimore. I have them winning the game, not by a large margin because these games are always very aggressive and very tight, but I have the Ravens winning 23-18 in another AFC North standoff between two excellent defenses. Now, moving into the late window, we have ourselves the Atlanta Falcons taking on Arizona and a returning Kyler Murray. So yes, Kyler Murray making his long-awaited season debut, 10 games into the season now for Arizona, and this will be a fun one to watch because there will be a lot of intrigue in how this matchup goes. Now, does the Arizona Cardinals offense come out firing on all cylinders with a rejuvenated Kyler Murray and, maybe some life in this offense here? Or do they fall flat? So maybe fun's not the right word. Maybe interesting is a better word for this matchup here, because I will say that when I look at this game here, I kind of look at it as a trap game for Atlanta and not necessarily a must-win for Arizona, but just kind of a let's have a good type of game against Atlanta game for Arizona. But ATL, if they want to stay competitive in the NFC South and in the NFC playoff race as a whole, you have got to come away with a victory now sitting at 4-5. And 1-3 on the road is not really encouraging for me, but the good news is Arizona, they are 1-3 at home. And I mean, their one victory of the season was in Arizona. So there is that, and it was against the Cowboys, but we don't have Josh Dobbs in the miracle maker that he is playing in Arizona anymore. And for what it's worth, Arizona by design does love to run the football, whether it was Kyler Murray before injury and even during his injury. That was kind of the bread and butter of them. And with James Conner now working his way back into the thick of things for the offense there, we should see some pretty heavily run-designed plays, especially as Kyler Murray works to knock off that rust. Atlanta boasts a middle-of-the-pack run defense as well, so that is something that I do think Arizona should be looking to target in this matchup here. And I do think that if Atlanta wants to win this game, they don't force a ton of turnovers, and they turn the ball over quite a bit. They have 16 altogether on the season. As long as they can just protect the football, I believe in Taylor Heineke as a better quarterback than what they were working with before. So I'm going to go with the Falcons. I'm not super sold on this one here, especially because Drake London and Mac Hollins are questionable for this game. I'm hoping Drake London can make his way back for this one here, because that would make me feel a lot better about Atlanta, especially when you look at some of the questionables that the Arizona Cardinals have themselves. But if ATL can just protect the football, I do think they have a shot. So I'm going to go with the Falcons, 24-20, just no bad interceptions, no fumbles, just protect the football. Arizona's not a turnover machine by any means in terms of defense, so it's not like you're facing a unit that's going to force you into all these mistakes. Just play good, sound football, get yourself back in the win column, and win a game that you should absolutely be winning, despite the fact that Kyler Murray's making his comeback. I think there's going to be a little bit of rust for that offense over there in Arizona, and on top of that, I don't think that the Cardinals' lone issue this season has ever really been quarterback, because Joshua Dobbs is doing a lot of really fun stuff, and it was exciting to watch. And I really think that Arizona's problems extend far beyond just the quarterback issue. So I don't really think that Kyler Murray coming back is going to be the sole reason why this team just starts ripping off wins the remainder of the season. I think it's going to be a little bit of a work in progress, growing pain type end of season for Arizona as they start to look forward to the 2024 season. Now we have the Detroit Lions taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. Lions coming off of a bye week here, sitting at 6-2, and the Chargers coming off of a Monday Night Football victory, an ugly one offensively, but a great one defensively against the New York Jets. When you look at the injury reports for both these teams, pretty small. As far as LA goes, unless I was missing something here, I didn't really see any questionables for this game for them. As for the Lions, Vitai's there. Donovan Peoples-Jones is also on there. And that's about it as far as questionables come into this game here. Maybe that gets a little bit longer in the week. Obviously I'm making picks on Thursday. These games aren't until Sunday, so those could obviously change between now and then. But as of right now, not really a lot to talk about on the injury front for either one of these teams. And Detroit, coming off of a bye week, should be very happy with that, coming in nice and healthy. Both these offenses are top 10 scoring units, and I think we're going to see a potentially high-scoring affair in this one here. Detroit, averaging 25 points a game, goes up against the Chargers, who are also averaging about 25 points a game. And as far as points allowed goes, 20.5 for Detroit per, almost 22 for the Chargers. I think there is a really good potential for some points here. Both teams love throwing the football, and defensively, when you look at both these teams, Detroit is about middle of the pack as far as defending the pass goes, and Los Angeles has been the league's worst passing defense now for what feels like, I think, 3 seasons. So, I mean, both these teams love to throw. They have quarterbacks that can go shot for shot with one another. I know that some people might not look at Jared Goff in the same regard as Justin Herbert, but Jared Goff has shown he can throw the football with the best of them. Wasn't, that long ago, just a few years back, he was going toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes on that all-star refereed game that we had, what was it, Rams and Chiefs? I know it was a while back, but we've seen that Jared Goff can throw with the best of them. Even more recently, this offense has been potent through the air in Detroit. So, with that, two teams that have stout run defenses, and I think it really comes down to, can LA just force Detroit into a passing type of game only? Because Detroit can run the football. If they can't do that, not really sure they can get it done here. I like the Lions. On top of that, LA, never really a home game for the Chargers. It's kind of unfortunate to see, but I could see Detroit fans traveling pretty well to LA. It's a nice location. Maybe get a fair amount of Honolulu blue in the stands over there, and we hear some chants for the Lions. I like Detroit in this one. Big victory for them to continue on. They'll be 7-2 if they come away with the victory in this game here, improving to what it would be 4-1 on the road should they win. And the Chargers, they're 500 at home, so it's not like there's a big home field advantage to worry about there. I like the Lions 34-31. Again, high scoring affair. I could see a lot of passing yards from both of these teams here. Lots of passing yards. Now we have the Giants and the Cowboys. And I've got to say, there's really not too much to dive into with this game here. Cowboys, third best in the NFL with points per game scored. They're sixth in the NFL as far as points allowed per game goes. The Giants have the league's worst offense, averaging just over 11 points a game, and they allow about 24 points a game. On top of that, we have no Daniel Jones now, which awful. And Graham Gano, your kicker, is also dealing with something as well and just got put on the IR. So not really sure what you're going to be doing about your kicker. Your starting quarterback, after just coming back from a 3-week absence, is also hurt again and done for the season now. You have Adoree Jackson listed as questionable. Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal are both listed as questionable. Paris Campbell's another one. I do not like the Giants for the rest of the season. Essentially, that's kind of where I stand on them right now. They are 1-4 on the road. Dallas has yet to lose at home. I don't really know how you could sit here and try to spin your decision into somehow the Giants pulling off some wild upset, whether it's Tyrod Taylor or DeVito. I don't know what his first name is. I don't really know how you can sit here and try to come up with a Giants victory. Not really sure how that is. I do have a note, though, that -17 on the spread right now, that is a bananas number. That's not something that you see in the NFL very often. I'm not sure if that's too much for a divisional game, but -17, I have the Cowboys winning 30-10, so doesn't really seem too far-fetched, but maybe the Giants could hold strong. Maybe the Cowboys are overlooking the Giants in this game and looking forward to maybe some other more competitive matchups they have down the road. But I expect this one to be a Cowboys routing. So 30-10, give me the Cowboys. The Seahawks are going to be taking on the Washington Commanders at home this week as well. And the Commanders, this one here, kind of a trap game for Seattle because Washington has won 4 games this season, and for whatever reason, people seem to just kind of count them out week in and week out. But I like Washington to be more competitive than people expect them to. And I've hammered this a lot. 2 of their losses this season are to the Philadelphia Eagles in very tight contests. So they have been very competitive this season when you look at the other slate of games that they've played. Now, Seattle, they're coming off of an absolute decimation at the hands of the Baltimore Ravens, and this is a bounce-back game for them, and it should be a bounce-back game for them. There are a decent amount of questionables in this game that I think could make things a little bit tighter than anticipated, though. Kenneth Walker's questionable, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Charles Cross, Jordan Brooks, Jaron Reed, Trey Brown, Anthony Bradford. They got a lot of guys on that injury report right now in Seattle. So I am a little bit concerned about the Seahawks in this one here. However, Washington, 30th in the NFL in points per game allowed. They're averaging about 27 points a game, and they have the 27th ranked pass defense as well. So there is a good opportunity for a get-right game from Geno Smith and company over there. And it really, for this game, if Washington wants to come away victorious, they've got to try to get it together for 60 minutes with an offensive line that has allowed 44 sacks this season and an unreal amount of pressure. Plus 6.5 for Washington isn't too bad considering just how competitive they've been. I have Seattle winning 24-21. So if you're somebody that likes to pick underdogs, I think Washington has a slim chance to upset in this game. And if they do lose, I don't really think that the Seahawks are going to be running away with that. Like, I don't know if the Seahawks are really a whole possession better than the Washington Commanders right now, because we have seen the Commanders, like I said, fight in a lot of their losses to the very end, and they would lose by about 3 to 4 points or less. And Seattle, again, they just got blown out. And on top of that, we saw them allow about 30-some-odd points in their OT victory against the Lions a handful of weeks back. And I'm not saying Washington is Detroit offensively, but we've seen Washington can put up points when they're allowed to as well. So I like the Seahawks, especially at home, but I don't think the contest is that far apart. 24-21, I'll take Seattle. Moving into Sunday Night Football now, this was a tough one, and I've got to say that. This was a tough one to decide on because you have now a rejuvenated Las Vegas team going up against a New York Jets team that is 500 and I think is kind of like, that's like perfect for this Jets team right now. They are a middle-of-the-pack team with an elite defense and an offense that is awful to watch. However, when you look at this game here, injuries and a few things defensively for the Jets kind of sway things in their favor, in my opinion, here, despite the game being at home and the Raiders being 3-1 at home as well for them. When you look at some of the injury concerns right now, Marcus Peters is listed as questionable. Max Crosby, a key cog to that defense. Nate Hobbs, another one of those guys. You got Luke Masterson, Divine Diablo, Austin Hooper, Greg Van Roten, Colton Miller, star tackle for them, Thayer Munford. There are a decent amount of guys that are on this list right now, and if you're missing a few of those guys in key situations, you might be hurting defensively. Not only that, you have a rookie quarterback in Aiden O'Connell right now who has like a bad game and a pretty good game so far under his belt as a starter. This Jets defense is going to be a tough task for a young man like Aiden O'Connell. They are third when it comes to allowing yards through the air. They are third in the NFL in sacks right now. They are fourth in sacks percentage, taking down the quarterback at 10.7% of dropbacks. Be careful. If you are the Raiders and this offense, you need to be on your A game. This Jets defense has made just about every single offense they've gone against this year look pretty bad. I mean, even though they lost pretty handedly to the Chargers last week, in large part, that game was so far apart because their offense was making a ton of mistakes. Their defense pretty much put the clamps on the Chargers all game long, and it wasn't for like absolutely short field position for the Chargers. I don't think that score line really represents just how close that game actually was for a bulk majority of it. Las Vegas, if they want to come out victorious, they've got to find a way to slow down the Jets on the ground. And I'm not sitting here saying that like the Jets are some wild rushing attack, but Breece Hall, when he gets rolling, is one of the best. Absolutely. In his very young career, when he gets rolling, he can rip off a 60-yard run for a score pretty much at any given moment. So if they want to slow down the run game and force the passing game of the Chiefs, or excuse me, not the Chiefs, of the Jets to just create issues for themselves, because it kind of seems to be their MO, you have a shot. But I like the Jets here in this one here as visitors. This is another one of those lower scoring affair type games for me. I have the Jets winning, and I do think the Raiders might put up a pretty decent fight. But again, this is a Jets defense that I think might have a field day going up against an Aiden O'Connell-led Raiders offense and his, third start now in the NFL. So I'll take New York 20-19. Hard-fought loss by the Raiders, but I don't quite know how they find answers against the Jets defense that has put the clamps on far better offensive personnel than what the Raiders are boasting right now. And then finally, to wrap things up, we're looking at Monday Night Football as the Denver Broncos take on the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. This is definitely another one of those trap games here. As Buffalo comes into this game, when you look at all the numbers, they should come into this game here and just roll Denver. Absolutely roll Denver. They're 5th in points per game, and they are 5th in points allowed per game. When you look at Denver, they're averaging about 28 points per game allowed, and they're about middle of the pack, scoring about 21 or so a game. Now, the best thing that Denver can do to keep this game competitive and at least somewhat close and even have a shot to win, one, you got to let Josh Allen make his mistakes and you got to capitalize on them. There are a lot of passes that come out of Josh Allen's hand that hit DBs, that fall to the ground, or just are errant throws that go into weird places that people just don't make plays on. He turns over the ball a fair amount. However, he can also completely torch a passing defense. And when you're Denver, your passing defense is one of the worst in the NFL right now. Somehow it's not the worst, but it's one of the worst. So keep that in mind. If you want to win this game, run the ball, protect the ball, and try to keep the ball out of Josh Allen's hands. Despite his ability to turn the football over at times, more often than not, he can basically control the game and win the game with his arm and with his legs. And you have the 32nd run defense in the NFL as well, so you want to try to keep the ball out of Josh Allen's hands as much as possible. But if there was ever a momentum building type of game for someone like Josh Allen, you're going up against one of the worst defenses in the NFL in Denver. I could see Josh Allen having a field day, getting the team right following a tough loss to Cincinnati, especially being at home. You want to come in and stomp the Denver Broncos in this one here. And we've seen them do that to some lesser opponents this season. I think there's another chance we see something like that. Denver, for what it's worth, though, a little bit more competitive as of late. So I have the Bills winning, but I have them winning only 27-17. I think that there are some mistakes here or there that could get in the way of Buffalo really running away with this game here. And like I said, for what it's worth, Denver in recent weeks has been a little bit more competitive, so I could see them maybe hanging on just a bit more than you'd probably expect them to. But I still have the Bills 27-17 with the victory. But those are my picks for week number 10 of the NFL. Again, let me hear your thoughts on this week's matchups. Who are you taking? What are your favorite bets of the week? Would love to discuss all that in the comment section down below. But that is it for me. If you made it to the end of the video, as always, I greatly appreciate you. I will see you all next time. Have a good one.